Terry, seen from a diplomatic lens, where do you see it going from here?
Well, certainly, I think Terry Malusky said it right, that it's probably going to get worse before it does get better. I think there's no question that both sides are now priming for something bigger. After all, if these allegations have already been sort of shared with India a week ago, it's likely that both sides are primed for what is going to follow, and it will require some kind of, real intervention, maybe by another country, maybe by a high level inside India, to kind of take a step back and say, let's try and address the problem. As you've said on this show again, I don't think there's any doubt that the problem that India faces from separatist violence that is fomented, instigated, incubated in Canada is a long-standing issue, which India has raised at many different times in its relationship. But I think there has to be some consideration to, as I said, what that relationship stands for. After all, Canada is a country that is part of the Western Alliance, that is home to hundreds of thousands of Indians, if not Indian origin Canadians. And from the Indian perspective, that has to be taken into account for Canada. I do think, yes, Prime Minister Trudeau is in the spot. He has got to be able to go public with some of these allegations that he has made, because it's not possible to just make the allegation and then expect everyone to keep quiet after that. But I do make the point, someone mentioned that he's probably having a tough time with his election. I don't know if you've read the speeches of the Canadian leaders that followed Mr. Trudeau. They were, if anything, even more tough on that position. And Pierre Poilievre, who's one of the main opposition candidates, Jagmeet Singh, another one, made it very clear that they are locking arms with the Trudeau government on this one.
Yeah.
So I'm not sure that even Trudeau losing an election is going to change relations.
Yeah, I'm glad you made that point, because Terry has been making that point that this problem isn't ending even if Trudeau loses the election. And Ambassador Sinha, to talk about Jagmeet Singh, an ally of the Trudeau government, his tweet today was quite extraordinary for a politician of another country. And if we can bring it up, he actually said, that he commits that there's going to be kind of justice served for this. And he said, I will leave no stone unturned in the pursuit of justice, including holding Narendra Modi accountable. Now, this is kind of extraordinary what's going on here. But the point Suhasini is making is, this is not limited to Trudeau. Trudeau provokes. Trudeau is like a trigger warning for India. But this isn't only about Trudeau. Ambassador Sinha?
Yeah. Trudeau has behaved in a very childish manner. India and Canada have had problems, as I said, for the last 50 years almost. The problem lies in the asylum laws that Canada had, or the Western countries had framed for communist rebels who were leaving the communist countries in the Cold War days. Those laws have been abused, and a whole ecosystem or a whole gang of people have developed in Canada, whose task it is to try and see if they can get immigration across from India into Canada on the basis of allegations against the government of India. Now, this is a major problem for India, and India cannot ignore it. But we have been living with this problem over the last so many years. But today, Trudeau has escalated the whole matter by raising it to a point of expelling diplomats. And he's also condoning charge of threats to Indian diplomats there in Canada. He talks about Western values of democracy. Is this the value that you have, that you go and kill diplomats? He can't even uphold respect the basic conventions of the Vienna Convention. Yeah. And yet he goes around behaving as if he's morally superior. That is what is the problem today.
What do you think is happening behind the scenes between India and Canada at this point, Ambassador?
Well, I think right now things would be very difficult, because what's happening is that there are personal threats against our Prime Minister, against our Home Minister. Now, this is very serious. And then you have all kinds of allegations that government of India has been accused of killing a Canadian citizen. This again is an extremely serious allegation to level against a government. So relations right now are definitely on a way down. They are going south. And one hopes that pretty soon something will happen that will arrest that fall. But the Indian community in Canada has to step up and start speaking up for the good relations that should prevail between our two countries. The 300,000 Indian students who are there, the large Indian community that is there, that does not support the idea of a breaking up India or promoting terrorism in India. Well, they should speak up. And the Canadian people, the other Canadians, the ethnic Canadians, they should also speak up for relations.
That last point is an excellent point. Quick last words from Sherbir and Yasho. Sherbir, the fact is that the only sort of imagery in some ways that comes out of the diaspora in Canada are crazy speeches by Pannu, who's talking about Hindus go back to India, who's talking about political deaths to the Indian Prime Minister. But Ambassador Sinha makes the point that there's a large Indian diaspora, and perhaps that needs to be not just vocal, but also vocalized in the media. Sherbir, just unmute yourself, Sherbir. Yeah.
Barkha, the ambassadors made a very pertinent point. And I believe that those voices are there. It's also a question of whether those voices are amplified and whether the Canadian government assists with also spotlighting and understanding the emotions of the diaspora and not just of one aspect of it. Even for the sake of argument, if there are protests for sovereignty, hypothetically there are, and those are peaceful protests, that's got space. India may disagree with it, but that could be an arguable space. But the fact that that moderate voices do not and those setting a progressive agenda don't get the same degree of protection versus those that are actually undertaking such activities getting the spotlight, and them being allowed to frame both a political agenda and now a foreign policy agenda, I think speaks to a very complex issue that's going to need a significant amount of resolution, and which is also going to be contingent on Indo-Canadian ties in times to come.
I want to just give a last word to Mr. Azad. Sir, if you would speak as an intelligence officer today, what might this mean for the community? Because that's the community that's being pulled in here, right? That's the social media, somewhat childish. Even some Indians have said, "Oh, it's very excellent if we have done this." There's that kind of commentary. There's concerns about the security of the diplomat, the Indian diplomat who's been expelled. Speaking today as an intelligence officer, how do you look at what might happen next? What the implications of this are?
Let me say that as an intelligence officer, my first observation is that moderate people don't matter at all. And the moderate Indians who live in Canada are least concerned with what is happening, whether about the Khalistani activities or even what is happening to Indo-Canada relations. It's the most vocal community which matters. And that's why the Gurdwaras, which are very strong, which get the funding from the Canadian governments, they are at the edge of talking about Indo-Canada relations or Khalistani activities or secessionism. But, I would definitely say one thing, Barkha, that diplomatic parleys must go on. Canada, after all, is a liberal democracy. And if our diplomatic relations or the intelligence relations are a little frozen, let it be retired, diplomats like Dilip Sinha or aided by some intelligence officials to keep on talking, because that's a very, very important thing. Because in the heart of hearts, they might be having their domestic compulsions, but they understand the reality. Khalistani activities cannot be supported by any country. And I understand that even if Trudeau loses, we still have a problem. But still, to explain things to them, to give the mountain of evidence the NIA has collected to them at regular intervals would be the correct thing to do right now. This is not the end of it.